session, our meeting. Let's see, we have a full house, so
For now.
now. Any public comments on items not on the agenda of those green forms? Did anyone have something they wanted to discuss that is not on the agenda? Seeing no one, moving to the consent calendar, minutes from our last meeting.
I move that we approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I'm abstaining.
One abstention, 6 ayes. It passes. All right, moving to the matter for public hearing, item 14-D-04 and 14-UP-05, 999 Fremont Avenue. At this point, I'm going to have to recuse myself since I have an interest in 1000 Fremont Avenue. That's within 500 feet. So I'm going to pass the gavel. Normally, I would do to my vice
But
commissioner.
I'll have to recuse myself because our architectural team is presenting tonight.
So I'm going to pass it over to our most recent chair, Jerry.
Anybody else? All right.
Bonne nuit.
If you intend to speak tonight, you need to fill out one of these green cards and get it to me. If you don't have it in the next couple of minutes, I'm going to close the floor for that, okay? Just go out in front and pick one up. If you have any cell phones, please now turn them off. A lot of movement there. Oh. If you have a mic, put it on. Okay. Who's going to be presenting?
Good evening, Chair and Commission. My name is Sean Gallegos, Assistant Planner in the Planning Division. The project before you tonight has several components, including a commercial design review, use permit, and subdivision application for a tentative map for a 3-story mixed-use multifamily residential and commercial building at 999 Fremont Avenue. The building will include 1,345 square feet of commercial space for 2 suites on the ground floor and 5 multifamily residential units on the second and third floor with 15 parking spaces. The primary entrances for the residential and commercial suites are along Fremont Avenue, with a secondary access to the residential and commercial areas provided from the garage area. A driveway is also provided to the parking garage is located along Miramonte Avenue. The plan also includes expanded sidewalks along all frontages with a width of 5 feet, realigned ADA accessible ramps, and bicycle lanes along Fremont and Miramonte Avenue to provide a safe and pedestrian environment. The project also includes 6 Class 1 bicycle facilities located along in racks on Fremont Avenue and in the garage and basement, and 13 Class 2 bicycle racks. As outlined in the findings, staff believes the project is consistent with the policies and goals of Loyola Corners, neighborhood commercial center specific plan, specific purposes of the development standards such as setbacks, parking off-site improvements, including street trees and furniture of the commercial neighborhood zoning district, except the height of the structure is 3 feet taller than the permitted height of 30 feet. Thus, for the Commission, staff recommends that the roof element should be redesigned to meet the parapet definition to comply with the maximum height for the CN district. The project was reviewed by the Bicycle and Pedestrian Commission on August 27th this year, and was also previously reviewed through a study session with the Planning and Transportation Commission on January 23rd of this year. Mixed uses in the Loyola Corners district requires a use permit. Additionally, the use permit requires special findings for expansion within Loyola Corners. The design is a contemporary architectural style that incorporates some traditional elements such as the sloping roof form, balconies, and horizontal siding details, which are complementary to the character of the district. The more contemporary elements include the standing seam metal roof and the glass railings. The on-site amenities for the residential units include private storage, bicycle storage, and roof deck with outdoor patio and landscaping. While the project does have integrity and high-quality materials, staff could not make the design review findings that the project has an appropriate relationship to the structures in the immediate vicinity. Since the study session, the applicant has refined the project with the reduction of one residential unit from the third floor. This has allowed the incorporation of recessed balconies on the second and third floor, which has created a diminishment in bulk along the second and third floor. However, in staff's view, this will be one of the first significant developments in many years in Loyola Corners, and it will be a dominant structure which may provide and define the direction of Loyola Corners for years to come. And although the applicant has responded in many ways to reduce the bulk, the three-story massing exacerbates its scale, and it appears significantly out of character with predominantly one- and two-story structures in the immediate context. Thus, for the Commission, staff recommends the massing should be reduced to improve its relationship to the surroundings. The project also requires a subdivision application for a tentative map for condominium purposes. The map will subdivide the property into five residential condominiums, 2 commercial suites, and common area. Staff would like to note the perspective drawings are inconsistent with the submittal requirements for the commercial and multifamily design review process, and staff will work with the applicant to improve the scale of the perspectives to meet the quality and requirements for the city prior to scheduling the project again for the Planning and Transportation Commission. Thus, for the Commission, staff recommends that the Planning and Transportation Commission continue design review and use permit and subdivision applications based upon staff's direction, which includes that the photovoltaic system structure should not exceed 4% of the gross area of the building roof, that the roof element should be redesigned to meet the parapet definition, that the sign concept should be provided for the multiple tenant spaces, that the landscape plan should incorporate Chinese pistache or fruitless pear trees along Fremont Avenue and Miramonte Avenue, that the line of sight study should be provided for the intersection of A Street and Miramonte Avenue and for the driveway openings along Miramonte Avenue. Staff must note the receipt of 5 comment letters and emails from residents, and staff has forwarded them to each of the commissioners. These letters were from Terry Fong, Jessica Hirschfeld, Jim Lemke, and Jeff Woodfolgel. I'm sorry if I've made a mistake on the name, at 1473 Miramonte Avenue. Debbie Skelton of 1045 Fremont Avenue, Casey Fitzpatrick of 151 Mountain View, Pat Marriott, was signed by 13 individuals, multiple addresses, and then a Terry Tasmaski. This concludes staff's presentation unless there are any questions.
Okay.
I have 3 questions.
Okay. Settle down.
All right.
I'm going to start with here and end up with you, okay? Only because they said the same thing. Phoebe, why don't you start?
No, I'll let Mike.
Okay, Michael, we'll start in this.
So, Sean, I assume this is a typo, but the San Antonio Valley Transportation Authority on your report was actually supposed to be the Santa Clara. Is that correct?
Correct, that is correct.
And then the other question I had was about A Street. There's conversation with BPAC about Miramonte and Fremont, but nothing about A Street. Has anybody looked at A Street, or is that a separate project? Because I know that we've got a lot of other things going on in that area.
This proposal does not involve any reconfiguration of A Street. We have a streetscape plan for the Loyola Corners area, and there was a concept to look at making A Street one way. However, that's a plan that hasn't been.
So A Street's going to be a separate item, because I noticed that it was talked about was the bike lanes and everything else that was going to happen there.
That's right.
Okay. And then my last question, could you describe, on the report it says that the project proposes a relative high floor area ratio of 279%. I didn't quite understand what that was about. Was that because there's area above on the roof that they can use it, and therefore exceeds? I didn't understand what 279 meant.
It's not the roof deck, it's the usable square footage. So the lot size is
7,800 square feet.
7,500 square feet roughly.
Yes.
So 100% FAR would be 7,500 square feet. times 2 would be 1,500 square feet.
Gotcha.
So this is 2.79
Says the
FAR.
floor area ratio.
Yeah,
And
I
then
just was trying to understand what that meant. Okay.
Just to add to A Street, there's a conceptual design plan that does those things to A Street, turns it in one way, puts in dedicated bike paths on either side, et cetera, but it hasn't been fully vetted yet for circulation purposes. It could still occur within the right-of-way that exists out there regardless of this project. What this project does do is introduce a 5-foot sidewalk with trees on the interior side of the project along A Street, which doesn't exist currently.
Okay.
There is no currently sidewalk on this side on A Street.
Right. Okay, thank you.
All right. You good?
Yeah.
Dan? No questions? Maybe, no?
So I have a question, and it's partly just to better refresh our memories, but also since we have a large number of members of the public here, it may be helpful. In terms of design review and requirements, it would be very helpful just to get a brief explanation of the general design guidelines we need to work through, the specific design guidelines relative to the Loyola Corners specific plan, and then at least an understanding of there are some specific requirements with regard to retail space or commercial space, and how those, just a brief summary of those three, maybe it would be very helpful, because I'm sure there'll be questions, perhaps some commissioners, but also perhaps some members of the public.
So this property is in the commercial neighborhood zoning district, which has purposes in terms of reinforcing neighborhood commercial economic interests and appropriate relationship to nearby residential properties, although this project isn't adjacent to residential, but that tends to be a difference in this commercial neighborhood zoning district zoning code versus other commercial districts. This is a special area. It's also in the Loyola Corners specific plan zoning area, which has a whole other set of regulations. The goals of the Loyola Corners specific plan are to further the economic or improve the economic vitality of this area, and there's really two main tenets in that plan. One is with regard to the economic vitality. It requires that the first 15,000 square feet of additional building area in this district be commercial, retail in nature. And for the purposes of this plan, retail is retail, personal service, restaurant. Those are all within the definitions of retail in the Loyola Corners specific plan area. And then once that 15,000 square feet of commercial area is attained, then second floor commercial area and second floor office can be attained. It's neutral on the residential component. The second aspect of the Loyola Corners specific plan is with regard to architectural guidelines, and those really speak to the unique character of Loyola Corners, the small scale, rustic, unpretentious quality of that district, and really adds that layer of guidelines to your consideration. And then finally, overarching all of that are the general design review findings that you'll be considering that talk about an appropriate relationship among surrounding structures and producing high quality architecture and appropriate residential components when they're relevant.
And we are required to in our findings to satisfy all three, is that correct?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you.
Jerry, if I could ask David to expand. So if the first floor is retail, as commercial defines it, is office space, what uses are permitted in the CN under the Loyola Corners specific plan?
The specific uses are with regard to, it defers to the commercial neighborhood zoning district.
Okay.
And so the ground level, it's retail, personal service, restaurants, parking. Those are all permitted uses at the ground level.
And on the, above that, once you break the 15,000 square foot of commercial,
You can have personal services at the second floor, offices.
Offices.
Offices at the second floor. You can have residences
Do
at the
offices
second
have the
and
same-
above the first floor, so second and third floor.
do offices have the same one car per 300 square foot requirement for parking?
Thank you. That's another unique attribute to the Loyola Corners
All the same.
specific plan is to encourage development potential in this area. It adopted a uniform one parking space for every 300 square foot of building area, regardless of its use
Right.
for commercial uses.
Thank you.
So, thank you for that.
Okay, just as a, so I have a couple of questions. One is under the staff review, under the general and specific plan compliance, there's a sentence that says,
What page you on? Click.
it's the discussion right here.
Page 2.
Says the specific plan did not identify a financial means to acquire the property. What relevance is that?
This parcel, it was called the photo drive-up parcel, as of relating to a former land use, was a special parcel, and the specific plan identified, I think, 5 special parcels in this district for certain types of development. And this specific parcel was earmarked for potential open space and for a hallmark urban design feature, such as a clock or a fountain or something like that.
I'd never heard that.
And ultimately, though, over the years, and so that was the vision of the plan. But of course, there's an economic element to that, and the city, never pursued financially with the owner buying this property for those purposes, and nor did the plan have any financial mechanisms to achieve that. And in fact, nearby, across the street at 1000 Fremont, where the clock is, when that property redeveloped almost a little more than a decade ago, they incorporated the clock tower as a gesture towards that neighborhood-defining element. And so, really, we were just trying to explain why this is not an open space parcel and it's appropriate to develop with the mixed use.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Okay.
So, David, does that mean at this point the city has lost the option of acquiring it other than through eminent domain if they had an interest in acquiring it?
I mean, that would be one way to do it if it's not if it wasn't negotiated with the owner. Otherwise, that would really be our only other way.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually, I have another question, but incidentally, the time is over for the green ones. So if you haven't given one, it's too late. Last question for me is that in your staff report before us, you didn't mention anything about the BMRs?
Oh, there is. There is
Well,
something
no,
about
well, no. It's in the staff report, but it wasn't mentioned here, and I consider that a very important element, because we have basically 2 alternatives. One, the developer has. One, he has, if he goes with 5 units, as we all know, one of them has to be a BMR, or he can forego one of the units and just build 4. Well, that's pretty important to the developer and this group, so just want to bring you all to that attention if you didn't
The
get it.
staff does request that the commission provide direction.
Okay. But it wasn't mentioned in the staff report.
Well, and then there's a letter that's from the
That's right.
applicant, which I was going to wait till the applicant came up to ask that question.
All right, I just want to bring that up. Okay.
I have another question for staff.
Go.
So this is a little bit of detail, but it seems odd to me that the 4% of the roof area for solar, that's a really odd requirement, David. And is it my understanding that is sort of an old requirement that came from roof-mounted equipment like air handling and other kinds of ducting and plumbing that might be on the roof?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It didn't, I don't
It's
think
still
it
like to limit the
envisioned
solar to
elevated
4%.
solar panels.
Yeah.
I mean, the solar panels could be achieved on the surface of the roof, and then they wouldn't be under that provision. But this is to control the amount of visible rooftop structures. So.
And what was the issue with regards to the height? Can you elaborate on that?
It's with regard to how we measure the building height, and when we have a sloping roof like this, we measure the building height to the average of the tallest wall plate, averaged with the peak of the roof, and that's as opposed to measuring it as a flat roof. And so with this design, it's technically a sloping roof element that we measured slightly above the roof deck. And so as it's presented to you, it's about 3 feet too tall. If it had an alternate roof design with a parapet, a traditional parapet, which would be a 90-degree wall-like element.
It's because of the slope that it's not considered a parapet?
That's right. So there's an architectural difference there between the roof and a parapet. So it could be designed in a manner to meet the code with a different style on the roof.
Okay, if there are no further questions, we can hear from the applicant. Well, I've already said 2 minutes. Can you do this in 10 minutes?
Well, I would hope so.
Okay.
I'm going to take 2 or 3 minutes, and then Chip Jessup will take over. Good evening, commissioners and staff. Thank you for your time this evening reviewing my project. You know, I'm very excited about our progress on the site. We feel that we've developed a real exciting design here. We've met with the staff probably 30 times over the last year. As it turns out, it meets all the zoning requirements. We feel that it does meet the height requirement. We certainly will resolve the issue with the roof to bring it in compliance there. What I wanted to point out is that, first of all, I wanted to say as a resident, and not a resident, but a property owner and business owner in the community and the city for over 35 years, that I find all the projects in town to be exciting and very nicely designed. The Planning Commission, the City Council, and the staff, the Safeway, all the projects are wonderful. Abby's Hotel across the street is wonderful. The design of the triangular additional project that recently got approved on San Antonio is a wonderful project. And I like to feel that my project is wonderful. I think that my project is similar to the 2 triangular projects on San Antonio in that, you know, they utilize a space. They're very effective. In our project, all the residential units have views, and that's the nature of a triangle. Every room in each of the condos has a view out a window. Other rectangular projects, such as 48 First Street, will only have views out one direction and limited. So I think my development is going to perform very well, be well accepted, and our family is proposing to move into the project as well. You know, as it turns out, there's discussion over the BMR. I think that we would like to go with 2 units, 2 on each floor, or 4 total. And in other words, we were going to connect Unit 2 and 3 that would enable us to, we would like to acquire and keep that unit in our family to reside there. I think threefold here. The project is exciting for the neighborhood. It updates the retail, gives it a much more modern look, and it enhances the community in that 4 families will be able to move into Los Altos that might otherwise take down some hillsides. The trend is that I think this is the future. I think that it's occurring, all over the state, that people are opting to move to town and forego use of vehicles, and that kind of effect is necessary here. You can walk to the bank across the street. You can walk to one of the gyms. You have a lot of services without getting in your vehicle. My project has, I think, also visually attractive in that my parking now is enclosed in the structure. You don't see a parking lot anymore. Whereas you see now 15 cars parked around the retail building, now there'll be 15 cars inside. They're secure, they're well lit, they're protected, and at night it's the gate closes and it's locked up. That's a far superior aspect to what's there now to what's intending to be built. When I bought the property in 1981, it turns out that I had a Safeway. It was much more viable, busy, and that's gone away. What I'm hoping that will be accomplished by my project is a beginning of a revitalization to Loyola Corners. And what prompted me to look at developing this property is I was getting a lot of unsolicited offers to buy my property to build a 3-story development on it. I received an offer from West Valley Properties, from Tracy Ross to buy the property. I received an offer from Abby to buy the property, and they all wanted to build a 3-story project on the site. And so it sounded very, very attractive, and we opted to bring this project before the city to develop ourselves. So I think it's very exciting, and looking forward to your favorable view on the project. It's an exciting time in town now. All these new developments are putting more feet on the street. Safeway's fantastic. The hotel is going to open soon. I'm sure it'll bring an extra 20 people to town. We want to do the same thing for Loyola Corners. We would like to start a redevelopment. As it turns out, the staff could attest to the fact that across A Street, Tracy Ross and her architect, who I believe are here this evening, have brought plans forward to put in a 3-story, 17 to 22 unit condo project with first 17,000 square feet of first floor retail. So I think the future is that this is what Loyola Corners will become. The fact that I'm in first, that's of course more difficult, but I think this corner, this city has wonderful place to live. People want to live here, and I think at that intersection, ultimately, there could very well be an extra 30 to 50 residents, and that's the extent of my presentation.
Thank you.
Shot my wad here. How much time do I have? 3 minutes? 4 minutes?
How much time do you need?
Well, under the circumstances, I probably need a lot of time, but I'll keep it short.
Mr. Chair, we were having a little bit of a technical problem with our laptop, and I think Mr. Bunker was
Killing time.
drawing out his comments a bit to
I
allow
get
for
it.
that.
That's why I'm at.
But aren't we
I
obligated?
suggest we
I'll
add a
keep it
few
short.
minutes to their time. We could.
Remember, you're also going to have 5 minutes at the end to...
Right. Oh, we appreciate that.
Oh, go
Thank you.
ahead.
Thank you. My name is Chip Jessup. I'm the architect, or one of the architects for this project. It's been a great deal of fun and challenge. I think we've worked really closely with the staff. We did, in fact, hear a lot of you all who were at our outreach meeting back in the summer. And we have gone forward. We think that what we have done is an improvement on what we had. We should talk a little bit about what this property is. It is unique. It is unusual. It is a very challenging piece of land, and it's also, as much as it's part of this Loyola Corners community, it is also sort of the southern gateway to Los Altos. So can we have the next slide? I mean, that is our site. And then we go on. Those are the roads, not including Foothill Expressway, that abut us. We understand that this neighborhood is, well, this is actually a commercial neighborhood, although there are homes around it, but down Fremont and across the expressway and further up Miramonte. But it is a commercial neighborhood, and it is somewhat moribund. I mean, I go there, I use things that are there, but it's nothing much has happened there in about 30 years, and things will change. We think that the changes ought to be high class. We think that they should be thoughtful and give some form to the neighborhood. We think we've done that. Can we have the next? There are other projects being considered in this neighborhood. So yes, our building, what we're proposing, is larger than what is there. It's not significantly. It's taller than than the houses than the commercial structures immediately adjacent. But as you can see, these other projects that are being proposed, informally so far, but we know that they're coming down the pike, are significant projects. They are looking at doing 3-story buildings. We think that having a good mixed-use building at this corner is appropriate. We go to the next. Now, some of the existing features about this particular property and this particular small area in Los Altos are, Greg's building has, I know he built it, and he built it almost 30 years ago, but it's a small commercial facility and has no particular architectural merit. As much as we like sort of the Town and Country Village appearance of some of what's on Loyola Corners, there is an inconsistent design theme through Loyola Corners.
You should be speaking to us, not to them.
Oh, I'm sorry. I am speaking to all of you. Sorry about that. There is a very sort of, I'll describe it as an inconsistent design theme through the neighborhood. If you include the bank building and including the clock tower building and then the buildings along Fremont and on the back side of Fremont and Miramonte. Our particular property has access from Miramonte and Fremont. One of the things that we have done is we are reducing the amount of access, ingress and egress to one. We think will be a safer way of approaching this project. Can we go on? Again, at our property, there's limited landscaping. The trees are not in the best of condition. We think that all of that should be changed. And we have listened to both the staff and some of our previous meetings with other Planning Commission members, and we have modified the landscaping, I think, significantly. As I noted earlier, this is the first thing you see when you come off the expressway, and it needs to be a good building. And the last item on this sort of existing features is that this building, not much has happened in this neighborhood, and it is going to change. It needs to be revitalized, and we'd like to be part of that process. What we've done, there are, the design review guidelines are obviously more established than this, but in its simplest form, we're trying to maintain this commercial area and upgrade it and retain its connection to the residential areas nearby. We think that having the commercial spaces at both the intersections of A Street and Fremont and Miramonte and Fremont is a good thing. It creates a storefront. It creates an access point for people to come in and out of the neighborhood. We have the residents. The main entrances to the residences are also on Fremont, which was one of the guidelines. And we should go. Most of what I was going to talk about are the findings. We believe that our proposal does meet the policies and objectives of the general plan and the specific plan. We accept the fact that our building is larger than the buildings immediately adjacent to it. We don't necessarily accept the characterization of it as being massive and overscaled. We think that as development goes on, it will be fit right in with what's there. We have articulated the building masses. There are changes in spaces. There are ins and outs on this building. We have landscaping at all three levels, plus the roof on the building. Entries to the various areas are recessed, and I'll stop if you wish. We have used high-quality materials, and I hope you've had a chance to see what is here, as well as what was presented to you in photographs earlier. The landscaping is significant. If you have questions about the landscaping, the landscape designer is here, and she can speak in depth about the elements that we have here.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Okay. I told them that already. Incidentally, I should point out that I met this afternoon with both the landscaper and the developer, which is customary, to go over the plan, so I just want to disclose that. Okay, next, well, do you have any questions for them?
Question for the applicant. So I heard Greg say that, I believe I heard him say that you're going to reduce the development to 4 residential
Yes,
units.
he did.
Correct.
Even though the plans that we got were for 5.
Yes.
Quite simply, we would just combine.
I understand.
Unit
I
2
just
and
wanted to make sure that was clear.
I have a drawing that includes, that shows the 4 units.
Yeah, but we can't do that because it wasn't in public
Yeah,
display.
no, I
But I just wanted to check that we should all be aware
So
of
the
that.
plans that we have get in the packet, because it had 5 residential units, will
Right.
will no longer be valid?
Apparently not.
That's right. It won't be.
That's it for my questions. Thank you.
John, any questions? No. Questions?
Well, I'm confused a little bit. So if there's only going to be 4 residential units, that means there's just 1 residential unit on the top floor? Is that the implication?
No, they're combining.
It'll be 2 and 2.
I see. Okay.
Okay. I don't have any questions. Okay, thanks.
I
If
have
you
a question for staff, just one last one.
Okay.
David, you alluded to something, and then we went right by it. You said, according to Loyola Corner's specific plan, the first 15,000 square feet of commercial development, the first 15,000 feet of development has to be commercial, and anything beyond that then could go to other uses,
Other commercial,
other commercial uses. So
and
this property is about 7,800 square feet. 2 floors of it completely would define commercial, and then the 3rd floor could be another use?
but the way this, it's a use permit regulation, it's unique to this district, and it says that for any building additions, the first 15 of commercial area,
Right.
first 15,000 square feet have to be ground floor commercial that support retail,
Ground floor?
ground floor.
Okay, that's the
Okay.
piece that
And
was
then-
missing.
And then once that is achieved, you can go to second-level service and office areas. It's neutral on
Residential.
the residential, and the residential is permitted under our general mixed-use requirements.
So the fact that this parcel is less than 15,000 square feet, the interpretation I think you're presenting is that if the entire first floor meets that commercial definition, then the floors above can go beyond.
That's correct. And
Thank you.
in this particular parcel, this project adds about 400 net square feet of commercial area. So it starts to achieve.
So I'm confused.
Parking
What?
counts as commercial.
No, my turn to be confused. So if there's 7,500 square feet on the first floor, wouldn't you, by the use permit, wouldn't you technically require that the first and second floor be all commercial service, commercial retail to satisfy that 15,000 square foot requirement.
No, this is the way this.
It's just ground floor.
It's just regulates
Okay.
the ground
All right,
floor,
all right.
and then once, district-wide, that 15,000 is achieved, then
It's district-wide, that was
It's
not on
district-wide,
this
not
parcel. Thank you.
That's right.
Thank you.
One question I have of the applicant, on the parking, now, you're not going to be, you said something about securing the parking area in the evening. Well, not the 7 units that are going to be for retail. Do you mean that too?
Well, I mean, the retail would close at normal hours, and,
Not if it's a restaurant?
well, it would be, it's the homeowners association. We would decide what the tenant hours would be.
Okay, I just
Yeah, it
don't
would be-
want you to, I don't want to approve something and you say you're going to close it up at 6 o'clock and you have a restaurant there, and that's,
No, that would be,
okay, all right, got it, all right. Thank you. Okay, so next up, as you can see, we have a lot of these here, which means a lot of you have something to say. I'm sure it'll be some positive and some not so positive. You're going to each have 2 minutes. And please, we've all been on this planning commission for 6 to 10 years. If someone says that it's too high for them, the next 10 people don't have to say that. We got it. No, we get it. They can say.
They can say, I agree.
You can say I agree, but there's no need to embellish it. We all get it. So I'm saying this to be succinct and to know that we all will listen well, okay? The first one that I want to call up, and in no particular order, is Brian Jackson.
And then do you want to have the next?
Go to the follow-up.
And next in line will be Barbara, is it Lobner? Why don't you sit right over here in the reserve seat? Barbara? Okay. 2 minutes.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Brian Jackson. I'm with Hexagon Transportation Consultants. I prepared the trip generation study for this project, and I'm here to answer any questions that you might have that are related to that. That's in the staff report toward the back, I believe, as an attachment. I feel the project, it's a good use of the awkward the awkward space. I think it's good. It's adding beneficial pedestrian and bicycle facilities. It's going to improve safety in that area. Another component of it is it will remove the driveway on Fremont, and also the left turn, the ability to make a left turn to and from that driveway on Miramonte, which will also improve safety along Miramonte, so thereby reducing the potential conflicts and safety issues there. And I think the project's exciting, and I'm happy to be a part of it. So,
Thank you.
thank you very much.
After Barbara will be Joshua Roper.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Loebner. I live at 1644 Newcastle Drive. I live down Fremont. I come through Loyola Corners many, many times a week. I understand that downtown and at Loyola Corners has needed redevelopment, but what I'm hearing from the applicant and his designer is that that comes to mind is 50 wrongs don't make a right. And, downtown needed to be development, but the vision is still dense and compact. Traffic is difficult, parking is difficult, egress and ingress is difficult, pedestrian walking is difficult, pedestrian safety is marginal, and I'm very concerned about the residents and their children in this area trying to manipulate a commercial/residential area and coming and going. When they say they don't understand the comment about massivity, well, in terms of the square footage, the footprint, there's no further massiveness that you can put there. I'd like to see more setbacks. Yes, a sidewalk and a few trees is fine, but how about a sidewalk and a green buffer that creates more of a setback? In fact, the 15 parking spaces creates a visual setback. I don't have a problem with that. If there's open parking spaces, I don't have a problem with that. The density of it, he bought a funky triangle spot, and I just don't think that if we regulate it, that it's a taking if you build it with decent architectural and setback design, including a roof that is a real roof and not just a facade like a tilt-up building.
Thank you.
Well, actually, that bill's the 32nd one. Just FYI.
After Joshua is Catherine Wurzburg? All right, great.
Good evening. Joshua Roper with Charles Salter Associates. We did the environmental noise study for the project, and I just wanted to walk through that really quick. I believe it's in the appendix of the staff report. In order to evaluate noise at the site, we went to the site late September, early October, and measured noise levels at the site over a multi-day period and compared those with city guidelines for noise. At this site, noise levels fall into the normally and conditionally acceptable categories for land use compatibility for commercial and residential. And so
Excuse me.
Yes.
I've just been informed, and I didn't know this, but if you're a consultant, then that takes up applicants' time.
Okay.
Do you want to take up applicants' time? Because they have 5 minutes at the end. Do you want to eat into that?
No.
I didn't think so.
I'm available if you have questions.
Okay, that's cool. Thank you. If there's any other applicants on here and I call your name, just tell me it's okay, all right? Thank you. After Catherine is Bill Shepard.
Hi there, I'm Catherine Wurzburg, and I live in the Country Club area on Terrace Drive. So I drive down Terrace every day to either go south to 280 or into town. And while I applaud the owner and the designer for wanting to improve the neighborhood of Loyola Corners, I really agree with Barb Loebner that it's way too massive for that particular site, and it's out of character with the rest of the area, and it is, I've looked and I don't see any other three-story buildings except in downtown Los Altos, or I'm not even sure how far south. So it's really out of character in terms of height. I'm also concerned that the parking is indoors and the two retail spaces are very, very small. One is, well, these are the ones, the plans that were online, so I don't know if they're the latest ones, but one retail space is 719 square feet and the other is 626 square feet. That's really, really small. And one of the concerns I have is the parking in and out. So it seems to me that the first floor is going to have an enclosed parking structure. It's going to be underneath, I mean, it's going to be on that first level. So I'm wondering how high that first level is and what the air quality is. Thank you.
That's just a warning, you have 30 more seconds.
I have 30 more seconds? Okay. Well, I can tell you, I don't know if you've been there, but I would suggest that you go to that neighborhood and you drive around and you go to the country club and you drive down, because what you would see,
I live in that neighborhood.
it would be like a building like this. That is what it would be. Yes, everybody would notice it, but I think it would be totally out of place in the neighborhood and with the character. Thank you.
Thank you. After Bill is Andrew Pajak. Did I say that right? PJ?
Hi, I'm Bill Shepard. I live at 1457 Miramonte, which is 5 houses down from the post office. I am a BPAC commissioner, but speaking on my own behalf tonight. I am in favor of this project. I've lived in Loyola Corners for 7 years. I've been members of the gyms there. I work from home, so I spend a lot of time in the neighborhood, and I've been looking forward to redevelopment for many years. There's no sidewalk on the west side of Miramonte that I can walk down without cutting through the dry cleaner's lawn and a parking lot to get to the restaurants. The buildings are kind of ramshackle, and frankly, none of them, other than perhaps a Bicycle Outfitter, have been there for that much time. And I think redevelopment is key. I think this is a high-quality project. I'm not at all concerned with 4 or 5 residences adding an appreciable amount of traffic, and I think the traffic consultant report backed that up. It is using that space to the fullest, but that's the way development is happening today. Los Altos can't completely opt out of smart development that's happening everywhere in terms of density and the need to not be quite as sprawling. So I think that this will kickstart. Having a few more residents there will help with viability of other businesses and hopefully kickstart other developments. And as was pointed out in the presentation beforehand, the Water District is planning to build something on the parking lot where the Echo used to be. and I would imagine they will build as high as they're allowed to. I wasn't aware that the Tom's Diner building may be under redevelopment, but I'm sure that whatever is built there as well is not going to be a one-story building as well. So I think this is an excellent project, and I'm in support of it.
Thank you, Bill. After Andrew is Linda White.
Hey, good evening. I'm Andrew Pijak. I live on Dolores Avenue in Los Altos, and I oppose this project. You know, that ramshackleness is what we kind of call village character, and the specific plan is more or less, well, actually more what was created to preserve that village character. And as Mr. David Kornfeld said, it is a whole nother set of regulations in addition to the building codes that must be met. And in my opinion, it's hard to believe that they even read the specific plan for Loyola Quarters. It is a different specific plan than downtown Los Altos. Page 45 of the specific plan recommends that the building be removed as an open plaza. If it's so important for the specific plan, which mentions that as one of the highest priorities, then why would we ever consider building a 3-story building on that site? It just doesn't make sense to me at all. And I encourage all of you in your spare time, if you have any, to stand in the center of that triangle and just look around and try to envision 4 or 5 families and retail at that spot. You know, I've done it, and it just, using common sense, it's just ridiculous to me. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Andrew. Linda White, and after Linda is Rick Walleye.
And just for everybody's information, that first beep is the 30-second warning, so you have 30 more seconds to go.
After the first beat. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Linda White. I live on Clinton Road in Los Altos, and I drive through Loyola Corners practically every single day. I've lived here for 36 years. I agree that Loyola Corners could use a little improvement. I'm not opposed to development in the area, but I am opposed to this particular project. A number of the reasons have already been mentioned. I would have to say that what I'm hearing that it is inconsistent with the existing Loyola Corners village-style architecture. I realize that can be interpreted in different ways. But I think that if this proposal goes through, it would create an undesirable architectural design precedent for any future development. I think that if we allow one 3-story building to be built, all of a sudden what I'm hearing is there's a lot of interest in building a lot of 3-story buildings there. I think you're going to end up with the streets the way they are right now, with this total kind of tunnel effect all throughout that neighborhood. And I really don't think that's what anybody really wants. I'm concerned about, I hear that we want at Loyola Corners commercial development. This particular project is primarily residential. There are only 2 little spaces for commercial development, and I don't see how that's going to really improve down the area of Loyola Corners at all. So I just want to say in my brief time that please take the time to consider your vision for Loyola Corners. I really don't think that you want to see a whole bunch of 3-story buildings, tunnel effect through all that area, and the traffic and congestion and the flow is already bad. I can't imagine more residential areas in this area. It really needs to be thought out well, and you need to take your time to really think about the impact to this community and the people who live in that area.
Hey, David. David?
After Rick is Pat Marriott.
David, can you make sure there's 2 minutes?
And
You've
could
started
you
at 3 minutes.
pause while someone raises the microphone? Because it's really quite low, even
Yeah,
for people.
I can help him with that.
Yeah, I know you're up.
And by the way, audience, we don't need to applause. This isn't.
We like to make it a
This isn't
safe
movie
environment.
theater. Thank you.
Okay. On your mark. Get set. Go.
All right. Previously, back in January, the commission found that this design was too overwhelming for the site. It's not been significantly reduced in size. The staff found that the three-story massing remains out of scale and out of character with the adjacent building, does not relate to human scale, and is not consistent with the plan for this area. I think it's a pretty building. I think it would look great in downtown Sunnyvale or downtown San Jose, but Los Altos has a unique character, and if I wanted to live in Sunnyvale or San Jose, I would have bought a house there. But I live in Los Altos. I live right around the corner at 1050 Fremont Avenue, and I feel that while it's a pretty building, it's totally inconsistent with the site, is way too massive, and overwhelms the area. So if you get it, that's fine.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Can you take a second while David figures out the 2-minute? Just let it run, and we can interrupt it at 2 minutes.
Kitty Euler is next.
David, if it counts up, we can use that, just like that. Yeah. Go ahead.
Should I go? It's Pat Marriott. I live at 1530 Oakhurst Avenue, which is just a couple of blocks south of the Triangle. I've already submitted a letter by email with signatures from some neighbors, but I want to say that I recognize that Loyola Corners is kind of funky, and I don't necessarily think funky is bad, but it definitely could be improved. So I'm not against change. But it's quite a leap from what was supposed to be at one time envisioned as a plaza with some open space to a three-story building. It's just a really weird place for a three-story building. And as someone else said, my greatest fear is that this would set a very bad precedent for future development in what is a really unique little part of town. I look at First Street, and that really scares me. I've only lived in Los Altos for not quite 6 years, and one of the reasons that I wanted to move here was because the lots are bigger, there's nice space, it's kind of got a bit of a country feel to it if you get beyond the downtown. But I always thought it was strange to hear people talk about the village, and I thought, I don't see a village downtown. I see a small town, and it's nice. But once I saw the horrific development on First Street, which Mr. Bunker thinks is wonderful, I realized that we've reached a tipping point, and what really is a kind of a village, if you think of Carmel Village in Carmel, not at the corner of San Antonio and El Camino, we really have a very special place here. And so I'm against this building. If I was a billionaire, I'd buy the Triangle and turn it into a plaza. And I think we have to be careful of what we're willing to sacrifice for that magic word vibrancy, because you don't know what you've got till it's gone. Thank you.
Thanks, Kitty. There's no name on it, but whoever is representing Tom's Depot, you forgot to put your name on it.
You're next.
Hi, Commissioners. I'm Kitty Euler. I live on Payne Drive, which is less than a mile from this site. I think the staff makes some excellent points about some of the issues with this project, but I want to talk about zoning. As you know, Loyola Corners is zoned for commercial use, and according to the code, the purpose of the commercial neighborhood district is, quote, to retain and enhance the neighborhood convenience character. This project, however, is essentially a two-story condo complex up above a parking garage. A tiny amount of retail space is provided on the ground floor so that the project can be called mixed use. I do not believe that the intent of the code is to allow large residential projects in commercial areas. Allowing housing above the ground floor does not mean that you put parking on the ground floor and housing above that. With commercial zoning, it may make sense to allow some housing above an equal or greater amount of ground level space devoted to retail. However, for this project, the amount of retail floor space is less than 10% of the total floor space of the project. In a commercially zoned district, the residential use should be secondary to the commercial uses, not the other way around. As shown in the renderings, the building reads as a residential building because that is essentially what it is. This project does not significantly increase the amount of retail space in Loyola Corners compared to the building that is already on the site. Only 357 square feet of retail space would be added. The project does little to enhance the commercial viability of Loyola Corners, particularly since there's plenty of residential space already in the area to support the businesses there. This proposal is also inconsistent with the Loyola Corners specific plan, which contemplates an entirely different use for this site, namely an open plaza. Admittedly, the city has not pursued such a project. However, the proposal is also inconsistent with the zoning code for the Loyola Corners specific plan zone, which states that the purpose of the zone is to maintain a neighborhood convenience commercial orientation, and sets forth the amount of retail and office space that can be added. The
Thank you.
section makes
Thank you.
zero mention of additional housing space. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Let's hold the applause, please. After Tom Ferry is next.
My name is Maria Gonzalez. I own Tom's Depot, and I've been there for 14 years almost. And this is my first time in a meeting for this project. So I don't know if before they talk about the traffic, but I'm going to go a little bit over. Since I've been here, I've been seeing thousands of accidents in there. I mean, some that the police department doesn't know because it's just not a collision right there. They just stop. It's almost every other day that cars wanted to, coming from the foothill going to the restaurant on that it's Fremont. The cars are coming so fast, and I don't think they see the red light right there, and they just want to make a left turn from the second driveway somehow. I don't know why. And then I have seen cars flip over right in front of the building, of the door. I have motorcycles on the floor, and it's just, they were saying that the entrance for the units are going to be in Fremont Avenue. I don't know how it's going to happen with that kind of traffic that we have and that
It'll be
kind
on
of
Miramonte.
accidents. On Miramonte?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought it was on Fremont.
No.
Okay, so, well, I came here just to see if I put such a huge construction, but they said massive is probably the right word. If someone can tell me how long it will take to build this building, if it goes through. Because, I'm right there on my entrance is on Fremont, but it goes along 8th Street, the business, so I don't think I will survive. My business with the noise, dust, and trucks coming and going, so I really need to know how long, if it goes through, how long it will take for me, because I don't think I'll survive paying bills and all those in there. So just to take in consideration that I'm small business and I live for that job,
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe the applicant can answer that question. And which one are you?
I'm Tom Ferry.
Okay, after that is Debbie Skelton. Thank you. I lost track here.
I don't think you'll confuse Debbie and I. My name is Tom Ferry. I live at 1055 Rosemont, just on the other side of Permanetti from the property in question. I think I represent the old crowd along with some, probably quite a few others. I've lived here since 1961, which I guess gives away my age. I'm sorry. I think, as a lot of people have mentioned, I'll try to keep it brief and not repeat things. I'm all for improvement in Loyola Corners. I'm old enough to remember when it was actually a train stop, and it hasn't been as good as it was when it was a train stop. And I would be all for an improvement in Loyola Corners. And I think Kitty said it best about what the goals are. And unfortunately, I don't think this proposal will achieve that objective for all the reasons that were stated before. I think, it needs much more setback and less height and a better overall plan for Loyola Corners and put these buildings in the context of an overall plan. Otherwise, we're going to have the same problem for 5 or 6 more buildings. So in summary, I'm all for improvement to Loyola Corners. This is a beautiful building that belongs somewhere else, and I hope you take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. After Debbie is Teresa Morris.
Hello, I'm Debbie Skelton. I live at 1045 Fremont Avenue. It's about half a block away from the proposed development. So I wrote this lovely speech, but most of it's been spoken about. So I'll keep it brief. And what I want to say is that this building is going to have a flat roof. So if precedence is set, then that would mean that all kinds of other commercial owners are going to want to build a 3-story, as was spoken about. But they're all going to be flat roofs to meet that 30-foot height limit. The buildings now do reach 30 feet, but only at the peak of the roofs. And I think that adds a certain charm to the whole community. If you start making all of these big buildings with flat roofs, big boxes, I sort of envision a warehouse district. I live a half a block away, and it's a low-density residential area. This is so different from where I live, just on the other side of the creek. There's such a big discrepancy. I just don't want to see it happen. I would like to see the lot developed. I'd be very happy with a couple of businesses downstairs and maybe a couple of condos on the second floor. But this is not going to work for our community, and I really ask Mr. Bunker to please reconsider. We're all out on...
You're talking to us.
I'm sorry, what?
You're speaking to us.
Oh, okay, sure. So let's see here. What I'd like to say is we need one of those orange tape things to look at what this really is going to look like. I don't know what you call these things, but they put the 2x4s up and they wrap the orange tape. I really want to see what this is going to look like before we approve anything. But mostly what I'd really like to see is a 2-story development here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. After Teresa is Leah.
Hi, my name's Teresa Morris. I'm
Leah
going to
Drive.
agree with, sorry. Are you ready?
Pardon me?
He wants to get the next person.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Is it Leah Drake? Is that it? Okay.
Okay. So after that?
Lee? E-L-I-E? Alcheck? Next.
He's here.
Okay, thank you.
Behind me.
All right, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That's okay, sorry. I live in the Loyola Corners area. I understand that something is going to go on this space, and I'm all for having something there. I am opposed to this building. I've discussed it with the owner, mentioned it to the owner and the architect when they had their meeting. I had hoped that when they met with all the residents that were at their meeting that they would have considered some of the points that we made. They did not. That disappoints me. I have a huge concern about when you're looking in Loyola Corners and just walking or driving in it, how this is going to block the accessibility to the beautiful hills that we see. It's an absolute stop. It's a huge barrier to the neighborhood as opposed to being part of the neighborhood. When one looks at the buildings that are in our neighborhood, including the homes in the neighborhood, this building does not work at all with what's there already. We have a fairly modest neighborhood, and this is an obtrusive building, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but that's how it appears to me. I think it's a hodgepodge of styles as well. I'd like to see something smaller and something that had a little bit more of a continuity to it. I have a huge concern, one of my largest concerns, and it hasn't been really mentioned at this point, is noise. So we've had a number of complaints about the noise and how it bounces in that area. If you recall the echo, it was called the echo for a reason. I say this at almost every meeting, and I'm going to say it every meeting that I have to. Noise travels very strangely in that area. I am awoken almost every morning and late at night. Last night it was a street cleaner on Foothill Expressway. This area needs special consideration for how the noise travels. So in addition to the building being large, I'm concerned about the noise.
Thank you, Teresa.
I have a question for Teresa before you leave. You're the first person to mention this. There was a neighborhood meeting with the architect and with the owner to discuss the proposed
Yes.
project?
Yes.
About how many people were there?
At least a couple dozen.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And I'm sorry, and when was that held?
I think that Mr. Bunker mentioned this, but seems like it was maybe in September, maybe August, somewhere in that range.
Yes, Chip?
Oh, sorry.
It was earlier. It was before the BPAC meeting, so it would have been in June or July.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
After Lee is Richard Ridelf.
My name is Eli Alchek. I live in Los Altos for 40 years, and I have an office at the Clock Tower building for 35 years. In 1986, I was a co-chair of the committee who wrote the specific plan. And from the looks around here, I don't think anybody else was in that committee from the people I see. Well, the objective at that time for that committee was how do we make that corner a vibrant corner so it will be like maybe a second downtown for Los Altos. And I can assure you that if we had a project like that on our desk at that time, it would have been approved overwhelmingly by the committee because this is an ideal things that we wanted to see happening at that corner. And I'm speaking as a member who was sitting there. And for 2 years, in 1986 until 1988, when we presented the plan. I'm in favor and encourage you to approve that. I think it will enhance tremendously that corner, which we so desperately need to see enhancement. As far as traffic, I drive in and out of 1000 Fremont Avenue maybe 3-4 times a day. I have not encountered any more traffic than I would when I get out of my house and have to clear the road at Claremont, at the Claremont School to get to Foothill Expressway. As far as accident, I can assure you that there were more accidents on Fremont and Grand than there were in that corner, which I probably can count on my fingers over the last 35 years. So we hear a lot of exaggerations, and you need to take it into account. And I hope you will approve such a beautiful thing to come up there, and
Thank you.
I encourage you.
I have a question for you.
Yes, please.
You said you were on the specific planning committee? On page 45 of the specific plan, it specifically says that the photo drive-up site should have been combined with additional, should be a park. So I'm kind of confused why there's a discrepancy
Let me
between what you're
explain to
saying.
you what happened at that time. Someone from the city said that they may have money to buy the place. So we said, fantastic, let the city buy it, we'll make it a park, put some benches, have people meet there, maybe go to coffee houses on the two sides. Then the city came back and said, we don't have the money.
No money.
Okay, thank you.
But in the process, that's what happened. That is exactly what happened.
Okay, and I have a question for you. If I look on page 58 of the Loyola District specific plan, it says architectural character should be informal and pretentious. The size and mass of structures and building elements should be moderately small, reflecting a human scale. The older design of the original design of certain older buildings should be respected if they're being renovated. Design of new buildings, additions, or other renovation should be compatible in terms of scale, color, and material with surrounding structures. Roofs should be limited to simple forms and materials, which tends to visually tie structures together rather than produce discord. And I'm trying to understand, with that set of criteria, how you see this building
Okay, let me
fitting.
explain to you. Times change. Architectural changes. Our objective at the time was don't come with something that doesn't fit the neighborhood. But now things are changing. People are building different buildings. Architects are designing different structures. And that thing will start an improvement that may create a trend that will make this Loyola Corner finally what we wanted it to happen in 1986. That's the way I see it.
Enough? Do you have a question?
No, I'm okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
After Richard is Mike Alczak.
Thank you. My name's Rich Verdelfs. I've lived at 1108 Fremont since 1989. As we've just been discussing, there was a specific plan developed in 1990 which lays out a vision for all of Loyola Corner, and specifically, as was discussed for this property, an open pedestrian park. And I'd like to quote specifically from that. It says, "The existing photo drive-up building currently occupying a portion of this site should be removed. This is considered one of the highest priorities of the specific plan." If we're going to put a 3-story monstrosity in where an open pedestrian parkway was going to be as one of the highest priorities of the specific plan, aren't we effectively abandoning the specific plan? In which case, I would suggest, before we approve anything, let's go back and come up with a totally new specific plan for Loyola Corners, so whatever we do in this site is consistent with a longer-term vision of the whole area, and not just make a one-off decision on something like this. Thank you very much.
That's it? Okay. Mike, you were the last one.
Good evening. My name is Mike Alczak. I grew up down the street from the site. I work across the street from the site. My wife and I and our 2 children, I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, live in Palo Alto, where I have the distinct honor of serving on the Planning Commission in that city. I know the role that you serve here, and I'd like to say that I'd like to think that planning commissioners serve a role greater than simply greasing the squeaky wheel. I say that because in this case, you are empowered to guide the improvement of all commercial assets in this town. Too many of tonight's comments failed to address a vision of the future. That specific plan that my father worked on, look up the date. It's too old. It needs to be updated. I'll say that the real assets of Loyola Corners are failing us. They're failing us. The fact that this project doesn't look anything like the building across A Street or the building across Miramonte should be a reason to support it. It should make you run towards it. I encourage you to recognize that the opposition tonight is exaggerating every angle here because they oppose change. They didn't say it, but they do. They hear the word developer and they start picketing. A little dust is not a reason to fail to encourage reinvestment. It's a growing pain, but it's minor. So the question is, what vision are you going to apply to this project? It doesn't violate your height restrictions. It doesn't violate your setback requirements. What it does is represent a vision of the future. Mixed-use development is about the only way Los Altos is going to meagerly satisfy any of its ABAG requirements. That notion that you would encourage a walkable, pedestrian-oriented building in this Loyola Corners is brilliant. I hope, for the love of God, I will live long enough to see the excellent work that you have done downtown continue in this spot. I just want to say that anybody here that opposes it is opposing work you've supported. You mentioned you've been here 6 years. I'll end on this. In that regard, I'm very proud of your progress as a planning commissioner in a neighboring town. Everyone, I just want to say, end on this, everyone in my demographic, I'm 32, I have 2 children, everyone in my demographic is talking about the wonderful transformation that has taken place downtown.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Thank you. Okay.
You're going to close public
Okay.
comment?
Closing public comments. Okay, what's next?
Well, the applicant has 5 minutes.
The applicant has 5 minutes.
Or they want to use less.
One of the first things I want to say is that there's been a lot of concern about.
Go to the mic, Jim.
I'm so sorry. One of the things that has been said is there's a lot of concern about traffic and increased traffic. In fact, the traffic study that was done, the trip generation study that was done, illustrates that there's proposed to be, when this building is fully developed, less traffic than there is today. And I can understand that people would say, well, that can't possibly be true, but I listened to the traffic analysis. I also want to give Leah a chance to speak a little bit about what she has done for the landscape plan, particularly as it relates, in some instances, as it relates to some of the changes or alternatives that she's suggested for landscaping. The last item I wanted to touch on is that we have the solar arrays on the roof. We think of those as not just generating electricity, but as a way of providing a shading for people who will use that rooftop deck. We can reduce it to 4%, but it seems like somehow there should be some alternative available. So, Leah?
Hi. So the landscaping is pretty dynamic on this site. I believe that we've done our best to create a site that kind of does go along with what is there, but also brings in some new elements. On the Fremont Avenue side, we have a kind of park-like setting with park benches and planter boxes with crepe myrtle trees, which will provide summer flowering as well as fall color. And the plants are going to integrate and bring in some different foliage and excitement there. We're using pavers all around all three sides of the site to sort of soften and create warmth around the building. The natural materials on the planter boxes are also going to do that for us. And then on the Miramonte side, we have the pear trees that are, significant of that area to buffer between the bike lane and the pedestrian walkway. Another option we have is green walls on the area next to the garage. We have a stairwell. We're thinking about doing green walls and proposing that that would also buffer visually the building. We also have vines on the back side there of Miramonte and A Street at the corner that can wrap around the building on these really nifty cable wire trellis system. And then on A Street, thinking also about the bridge that's going to be redesigned. The use of granite stone veneer was what I saw there in that plan. I think that redbud trees would be a really wonderful element as a street tree there because they're also very drought tolerant and they create some excitement and beautiful color in the spring. And we also have some planter boxes that are cut in and creates more green and also hides some of the gas meters and things like that with some fun foliage. Upstairs on the second level balconies, we have a couple of Japanese maple and planters, and same with the third floor. On the third floor, we're actually creating more planter boxes to infiltrate the stormwater. So it's going to be an ecological site as well. We're going to take the roof water and filtrate that water through the flow through planter boxes before it hits the sewer. And we're using the sort of plants that will do that for us, but also give us green and buffering all year round. And then last, we have the roof terrace, which Also buffers some of the solar panels, some of the impact of that with bamboo and some flax on the other side to give color all year round. And, you know, so you have something that's green and softening on all levels of the building. We can look at the elevations real quick. Fremont Avenue, you can see the bamboo on the top and the horizontal element of the balcony planters. And I guess that does it for me.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, discussion.
Jerry, I'm not offering to go first, but I would.
Oh, too bad.
I would, no, but I would like to.
You're up, Ed.
I would like to encourage maybe the initial focus of our discussion to be around design, because I think that may help focus us in terms of what the appropriate next steps might be versus, I mean, there are a number of other things in this project, but that's at least something I'd like to throw out as a way of focusing at least our initial discussion.
Well, but design includes height, mass.
Right. Design.
Balconies.
Right,
and-
right.
okay, all right.
As opposed to going through and looking at subdivision and
Oh, okay, all right.
those aspects of the plan. But this is the question.
I'll be happy to go first.
I always look to you.
You're welcome. So I live at the one end of Foothill Expressway, and I traverse up and down Foothill Expressway on my bike. And as well as I am very familiar with this area because my orthodontist is in that area, the post office is there I belong to. So I wanted to start off with thinking about commercial CN developments because there are 4 of them located along Foothill. And I thought it was a good opportunity to really look at all 4. And I think this is one thing that you're speaking to, John, is that whatever we choose to do here is really setting the precedent for all those areas. Because essentially, the commercial network, or commercial, I'm sorry, what is it? The CN, that's
Commercial
what,
neighborhood.
the commercial neighborhood, those buildings that are along Foothill are all pretty much, that's what they're zoned as until you get to downtown. What I noticed is that there is no 3-story building. I mean, the closest thing that comes to 30 feet are all downtown. And I looked through the entire, those 4 different areas, and I have to say, there's not even 2-story buildings that are in that area. There are 2 in this Loyola Corners out of the 20 or 30 properties that I saw, and there's 2 that have a half of a story that's built in the back. So we're talking about really what do we see as commercial neighborhood network and our commercial district and what's appropriate. I looked at Blossom Valley Shopping Center, and behind it is Springwood Apartments, and there are 3-story, 4-story buildings behind that. So that kind of gave me some sense of what perspective a 3-story building is going to have in an area. And I have to say, it's quite large and quite big for an area that I think is supposed to be part of the commercial neighborhood. And I just want to bring that as a perspective to look at and to see that, this is really going to be a change for that area. And it's hard for me to swallow to say I can really see that this is in a direction that we want to move to. When Los Altos, there isn't much building of that mass and size. I think it's a great looking building, and I think it's got a lot of potential. I think it's in the wrong place. As I looked at all those different shopping areas, it's hard to see something that size to be in that area and to say that's what we want the rest of Foothill Expressway to look like. It just was hard for me to fathom. I can see a 2-story building. I can see that progression. I think a lot of residential areas we've heard in the past that 1-story buildings and 2-story buildings and neighborhoods and looking at those. But to go from 1 to 3 is hard for me to really say this is the way we want Los Altos to look like. So that's...
I have a question for you, Mike.
Sure.
Because this is something that came up in the downtown. When we went to form-based codes, we eliminated the concept of stories. So what I think I hear you saying, but I don't want to put words in your
Sure,
mouth, is 30 feet is what's bothering you, because there are big buildings. The Bank of America building is a big building, but it's not 30 feet. And if you're saying a two-story building that was 30 feet high would still be too big for you, I want you to say that now.
Yeah, so the 30 feet is what I was talking about. Yeah, and I think most of the buildings are probably 15 feet and maybe 20 feet. But 30 feet is quite large. And
There are
quite-
two-story buildings in that area.
There are only two.
Okay, that's
But they're
more than
20
one.
feet. They're 20 feet.
That's why I want.
That's what I'm trying to say. They're 20 feet long. I was looking at dimensions, and that includes the clock tower building, and actually there's three. I forgot the clock tower building. What I did notice is that most of the buildings that are 20 feet high are not predominant. They're tucked away. They're not in this corner stuff. I mean, just kind of, not that I wanted to say that's a requirement, but I was just interesting that the clock tower building is tucked away behind. You don't really see it.
I think, I don't want to put words in your mouth either, but probably the reason why you don't notice them much now is that the second floor on all the buildings are recessed.
That's the two that I did see.
two. So
Yeah,
you
there are
don't-
two. There are actually three that are actually fully 2 stories. They're built all the way, they're 20 feet high.
So they don't look like boxes, they look like
They're buildings.
different, right?
Yeah. So that's pretty much.
Ken?
First, I want to disclose that I have spoken with the architect and the applicant
So-
on 2 different occasions.
I forgot to do that too. I was.
Yeah.
And I only did it once, though.
Spent a fair amount of time with them on both occasions, probably an hour at least. I also go through that area frequently, probably 3 to 4 times a week, both on my bicycle and in a car, so I'm very familiar with it. I've lived in Los Altos for over 30 years, so I've been around. So let me say a couple of things about the building. I think it is an extraordinarily clever design geometrically. It's being able to package as much as Chip has done in that triangular space is really remarkable. I think it's a really interesting design, and I give Chip and maybe Greg Bunker a lot of credit for the work they've done to build that design, to develop that design. But I have some problems. The first problem is I would never even consider supporting this unless I saw full photorealistic rendering of what the building looks like in situ. One of the things that has happened on First Street is that those buildings were developed piecemeal, and we saw beautiful architectural renderings of what the building would look like in the mind of the architect, but we never saw them in a photorealistic rendering. The first time we've seen one that's done properly was the building on the triangular spot that used to be a Chevron station on San Antonio, and the architect went to great lengths to make that in the appropriate scale, and it was absolutely remarkable. And I'm not sure what what the requirement is now, David, but my personal requirement is I don't want to approve a building until I can see what it looks like in situ. The second thing is I do feel that the building is both out of scale and out of character for the area. I think on the one hand, it's a great building. On the other hand, it just does not belong there. Whatever is built there, and I do agree that Loyola Corners needs some improvement and development, and that spot can be improved and developed, but that building is not the right building to go in that location. I'm confused by, well, a couple of things. One is, if it's a mixed-use building, why, as Kitty Euler pointed out, why is the commercial part of it so small? It's a tiny amount of commercial space and a huge amount of residential space. So it's basically a 2-story condominium sitting on top of a parking lot, which I think is an interesting characterization. Another thing I was interested in is that the person that owns the buildings just across A Street, I think her name is Tracy Ross, has written a letter to James Walgren for our benefit, in which even she, who apparently is proposing to build buildings and tear down her current buildings and build new ones, doesn't care for the building design. So although Mr. Bunker quoted Tracy Ross as being a person who has the same approach that he does and wants to develop the area, here we have Tracy Ross writing us a letter saying that even she doesn't like the design. And lastly, this is a nastygram to our neighboring city. It's really amusing to me that a member of the Palo Alto Planning Commission would come here and lecture us on how we should build our buildings when the stuff that has been going on in Palo Alto is absolutely amazing. And in case you don't read the newspapers or listen to what the residents of Palo Alto say, I can't believe you come here and tell us how we should build our buildings. That's about all I have to say. That's probably enough.
Okay. He asked me to go.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, John.
So, okay. So I also met with the architect over the summer. The people who have not been thanked yet are the people, members of the public who are here. We have too many meetings where there are one or two of you. We're in a position of listening to the usual cast of characters, and we don't get enough public input. And we got an earful tonight. And it was thoughtful and studied, and it wasn't what I characterize, I like it or I don't like it. It was based on fact and reason and people who've actually looked at the specific plan. So thank you all for taking your time to come here tonight. Thank you for being prepared. It frankly makes my job easier. This is a challenging site. And I think we have to acknowledge that even though the original plan said it would be best as open space, the city, for a variety of reasons, didn't make that choice. And the applicant does have the right to develop the site. And so we need to understand that that's the most likely scenario. But how the site gets developed does matter. And even though there have been a lot of quotes on what the zoning is, in Los Altos, design review trumps zoning. So even though you could, in theory, build a building that's 30 feet tall, it has to be done in a way that fits with design review. And we've now had two meetings, formal meetings, and in each case, frankly, it's the same feedback, it's the same story about bulk and mass, setbacks, things like that. The applicant talks about this in the same context of downtown. Downtown is zoned differently. This is the CN district. It, by definition, is different. The community in the last poll seems to be divided 50-50 on First Street. People like the vitality. People do not like the tall buildings. More importantly, I don't think people like the zero setback from the sidewalks. They don't like the second story that's not set back. And there's certainly been a lot of community input. Unfortunately, a lot of that was after the fact, which is, again, one of the reasons I'm very glad that all of you are here. But we need to think about that when we approve additional buildings downtown or look at our zoning downtown. And certainly, as we look at this district, we need to take that into account. I quoted earlier from the Loyola Corners specific plan, and this project fails to meet many of the criteria on the Loyola Corners specific plan on compatibility, on bulk and mass. It's too big. It's the wrong architectural character and style. I applaud Kitty for her characterization as this being really a two-story condo with a little bit of retail thrown in, which again does not fit in with what was anticipated in the zoning and what we hope to keep Loyola Corners, which is as a community-oriented retail and service site. So from my point of view, it fails on the specific plan, it fails on the general plan. We like when we have a project that can be tweaked to give the applicant the opportunity to continue a project. Having seen this project now twice and seeing the same issues come up, but the project just skinned slightly differently, I have to ask in my mind whether a continuance on this project is appropriate or whether we simply deny it, because really this project needs a blank sheet of paper, because what's being proposed, the mix of usages really does not work. The bulk and mass does not work for this site, and I recognize that there will be development, but it is in fact telling that the person who is most likely to do development views this project not as an example of something that should be built, but rather something that should not be built. So those are my comments.
Okay. So I love listening to the commission because I always learn things about different people's opinions. I agree with one of the previous commissioners. This is a site that will be developed, and I'm an architect. I do this for a living. I like to see buildings redeveloped, and Loyola Corners could use a facelift, and I agree. This particular site is a gateway. Every side is visible and is seen by many people all the time. This particular site is very difficult, and I will tell you why there's only 10% commercial, ladies and gentlemen. It's because everything is being driven by the parking requirement. There is no way to get an increased commercial development where every 300 square feet of development requires a space. The only exception to that is residential, where a unit can be 1,400 square feet and only require 2 spaces, where it would normally require 5. And that's why there's residential in this. That's a fact. And I think what that fact is telling me as a designer, as I would look at this as a design problem, is this cannot be developed as intensely as is being proposed. In fact, if this is going to be developed, I think it can be developed with commercial retail on perhaps 2 floors with parking on the rest. And that would be a compromise, because I too find that a 3-story triangular volume, which despite the best efforts of the designer, has ins and outs, but if you squint your eyes, it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck. It is a duck. It's a 3-story volume. And it's a 30-foot tall volume in the shape of a triangular solid. If it was a square site, it would be a rectangular solid. That, I think, is too intense for this, which is really a gateway building. I think the owner was absolutely accurate. This is an opportunity, and the opportunity is not being taken advantage of because there are so many constraints. And with that said, I look at this and I say, any building that goes on this site, we worry about the volume of the development because it is so visible. It has good access from Miramonte, and there are many things to say about this. It was very, very cleverly done. The access from Miramonte for cars makes perfect sense because traffic in this area, we know, it's not traffic per se, the traffic pattern is appalling. Both sides of the bridge, which is going to be done by the county, will continue to be appalling because they're not being addressed. The bridge is being addressed, but not the traffic. And so with that as a given, I look at this and say accessing whatever the parking is from Miramonte at least addresses that weakness of the site. I love the fact that the face of whatever commercial there is facing Fremont. It should, because that's the commercial face of the street, and there should be a continuity in the retail. We want continuous retail because it invites people to walk and stroll along, which is a good thing. The landscape person did a great job. This is really incredibly creative use and a lot of it, but not enough because the building is so big in its volume that there isn't enough space with grace, except even the nicest one on Fremont is barely, in my mind, park-like. There just isn't enough room, but it's full of stuff and it was very well done. It has lots of beneficial pedestrian and bicycle amenities, which is something we'll look at in any building. But as was pointed out by one of the speakers, the proportion of commercial retail that's supposed to serve the community is very low. And I appreciate there was a shrewd analysis that driven by parking. It's something we deal with a lot with big buildings in town. It's always driven by parking. And unlike other towns, neighboring towns, who have a train where people don't have to drive, there's access to another form. We don't have that. In Los Altos, we drive. We may bicycle and we may walk, but the big picture is we drive, we can't take a train, and the public transportation system in all is really inadequate. With that said, we live in a village. With that said, I'd like to point out that if we see this as a starting point for development in Loyola Corners, and I hope it is, I hope that we can see this project come back at some future date in a different form that really does enhance Loyola's Corners, give them a benefit to the public and to the town. I want you to understand also that I think that tall buildings are not a problem in this neighborhood. I am from the 50% of town who believes that the development that was very intense on First Street allows us at our perimeter to support the core of the downtown village. And if we didn't have big buildings, both residential and commercial, our merchants cannot survive. Therefore, if other buildings along Fremont came in and they were bigger, maybe not to the full height of the ability of the zoning, but big enough that they could bring some vitality in terms of feet on the street, I can support it. This particular site, I can't. With that said, in the overview, I have a problem with the building's architecture personally. We didn't need to talk about it per se because there seems to be a pretty good consensus even before Jerry speaks that we all feel that this particular building won't work here. But for me, when I look at the Loyola Corners specific plan and they talk about compatibility, it's not only the volume. For me, it needs to be smaller, have fewer materials, at least pick up on the sloped roof and not just a nod to it, something where it will provide on this particular site some kind of transition where it's bigger than what's there. It would be hard-pressed not to, but not so big that it uses every cubic foot available so that the next buildings that come in will see smaller scale with a lot of well-done landscape where there's a breathing spot and something that is handsome and has architectural integrity and style so that it will indeed be not only a gateway but also a good transition point. I'm done.
Okay. That's it? Going last has its advantages and disadvantages. Okay. So, my profession is that of a commercial real estate owner and part-time commercial developer. So we all have different eyes up here, and mine come from that point of view. So forgive me on that. As a developer, any developer that would look at this site, and if it was me, I would look at it the same way. The first thing they're going to say to themselves is, how can I maximize this site? That's the first thing you look at. And he says, then that's the dictate that they give to the architect. How can I maximize this site? And as you can see, they've done a pretty good job at 279% FAR, floor area ratio. When they were looking, when you compare what they did to the specific plan, you also have to look at the rest of that neighborhood as a developer and say, okay, what is it going to look like 5 years from now or 4 years from now? When we were looking at First Street, on the first building, we knew here as commissioners, and we were all here for that portion of the development in the city, we knew what was going down, and so we knew that everything on that street was going to be 40 feet or so. So when someone brought us a building, we knew that the next building was going to be the same size, and that was the vision for the street. We also knew, and I've said this more than once in a meeting, but you guys all haven't been here, so I'll say it again, is that the new dictate for the way that cities work is exactly what's happening in Los Altos. Why is it that you think that the town crier wrote that the retailers are having their best year ever? Why do you think that? They're doing it because of the way that the city is now being built, which is the way San Francisco's being built, San Jose's being built, Portland's being built, all cities. The reason being is with an aging society, like me, who the people that want to downsize, and for a group of 30 to 40 years old that no longer want the American white picket fence dream, they want the BMW and a condo. They want to live in the core of a town where they can walk and do all their shopping. That's the way the cities are going, like it or not. That's why when people say, well, they don't like the way Los Altos is going, I do. I think because it's the way of the world. They're doing it in Paris and in London and in Los Altos. But the question comes up is what, for me, is what is the vision long-term for this area? Best I can tell, you can only have this project, the one on the corner that includes the bicycle, that's this man, Mr. Ross's area, the one across the street, which is where I used to work out at Flex, and then, of course, the post, not the post office, but the water district. So I don't know what else you could, I mean, there's going to be like 4 projects. So the question we all have to ask ourselves is, what's the final vision of those 4 projects? Do we all want them to be, do you want them to be 30 feet tall? Because if we approve one, the next person up here is going to expect the same thing. No questions asked. It does, when I was looking at the plans, I see that it, in all cases, it met the zoning requirements, just like you said, John. But it's, in this case, for me, it's not about the zoning, it's about the specific plan, because that's a neighborhood. In fact, I live in Loyola Corners, but way over by, way far from here, from where this is, so I'm unaffected by what is going to be the future for this, less than most of you in this audience. I should also say that, in my experience here, at no other time did we have so many people speak when virtually no one in the neighborhood spoke for the project. Normally, it's at least 50-50 or more for than against, but in this case, except for father and son, Mike and Ellie, thank you. Everyone's against it. Well, that should tell us something, that you guys have thought enough about it, that you came in here and gave your 2 cents worth, and you don't want it. So if you don't want it, and it doesn't meet the requirements of the specific plans, as much as I have my developer hat on and empathize with the developer, I don't see how I could sit here and in all good conscience approve it the way it stands. So with that, I will look for someone to either cause an action for a continuance, or...
We should ask staff how to craft the various motions that might come up.
Yeah, well, I was going to suggest to them...
Well, I'd rather ask staff my specific question
Oh,
on
well,
the
go
motion
right
that
ahead.
I would like to propose. So, 3 members, the 3 wise men from staff, I think I've made my position clear that, given with 2 tries here and really something that in its fundamental form really doesn't meet any of the plans laid out, my inclination is to make a motion to deny this project because it really needs to start from scratch again. And, we have findings under Loyola specific plan. We have findings under the general plan. Would a denial simply reflect and recognize those specific components?
Well, I'll take the lead, and then David can add to my comments. But as the Planning and Transportation Commission knows, oftentimes projects will come before the Commission, and the Commission will request refinements to the project, which can be attained, and the project is continued to incorporate those refinements. But what's being discussed tonight seem to be much more extensive design changes, which would really result in a new project. So it doesn't sound, and this is for Commission discussion, not for me to advise, but it doesn't sound like minor changes to this design are going to get it to a point where the Commission can support it. So
what kind of findings, if that motion were to come to the floor, what would be the kind of findings that would be appropriate to accompany it?
Well, I think the extensive comments that were made tonight in the discussion can be incorporated into findings, and it is primarily the design review application, and then secondarily the use permit, because it is a mixed use, and there were many issues about the minimal amount of commercial square footage as opposed to the 2 stories of residential. So I think we would draft findings based on the design comments and the mixed-use comments and bring those back for Commission review.
Okay. So
rather than try to reiterate all the comments that were made tonight.
So if that's the case, then I have comments on the design, because there are many things I like about this project, but there are some things that, even if the majority here would have had a different tone, I would have recommended changes to it.
Yeah, I mean, my comments were kind of more general than specific, so.
But let me, can I make an attempt to craft a motion to deny?
But before you do that, let's talk about why we're talking this piece that Jerry brought up, because the applicant has the right to appeal to City Council. And if
Exactly
we
right.
don't give City Council
I agree with you
design direction beyond our comments in the general sense, who knows where they will go with it? And so it might behoove us to address those as a point of discussion before you make a motion.
All right, let's do
So
that.
that staff can keep, and it will be a public record, that there were specific design issues.
So let's talk about that. So, and I'll start with you, Phoebe.
Oh, thank you. Well, as I said, let me find my piece of paper. Architecturally, I find it lacking a coherent architectural style, and I particularly think that although there was attempt to break down the scale, it wasn't done in a way that's appropriate for commercial. It does read as residential, and so that was really a dichotomy for me, because this is supposed to be a commercial building. Now, if the only way this project is viable and City Council deems that an important thing to do, then looking residential properly isn't bad for that. At least it's sincere in its approach, but I find that it has too many materials, it's too fussy, it doesn't have a sloped roof, which I think would go a long way if it's going to fit here, whether it's commercial or mixed use with residential. I feel that this particular classic modern approach, which works well, I think, in the downtown, which is much more of that ilk, this is still a neighborhood, commercial neighborhood, and I think the neighborhood part got lost for the architecture. I think that Chip can do a lot better. I've seen him do better. So I think part of this was the intricacy of this particular, very peculiar site.
Okay. John?
So, the issue of setbacks from the street setbacks from the sidewalk, landscape buffer, setbacks on the second and third floor, all play, and all the comments fee to be made. I focus less on height and focus more on bulk and mass. And it's not to say that the building can or cannot be 30 feet. Because there's probably a design that would work at 30 feet, but it has to do with where that bulk and mass lies in the project. This one happens to be particularly challenging because, as Phoebe indicated earlier, you view this building from every single angle. There is no backside of this building. And so there's no place to hide. I mean, you can run, but you can't hide. And I think that just makes the issue of bulk and mass much more challenging to deal with. The character, the buildings by and large on Main and State Street are charming, but the buildings themselves are 1950s, and a lot of them are pretty ugly. But the reality is we have beautiful storefronts, we have awnings, we have variations in what each 25-foot module looks like, and that reads to us as a community as charming and informal, and those aspects really need to be kept in Loyola Corners as opposed to looking at the model of the new building at First and Main. That style, the things that we approved, rightly or wrongly, on First Street really are not the model. The building we approved at the corner of First and San Antonio, they may or may not work in our downtown, but they certainly will not work in Loyola Corners. It is commercial, but it's got to have a feel for Loyola Corners. And I think that's an interesting but challenging design issue for any architect. Hope that answers your question.
Mike? So, I have a few things. One is, I was glad to see the vegetation plan, but I really haven't had a chance to digest it all. It was pretty last minute. But I was concerned because I think staff reported the Chinese pistache and some of the trees, that there would be consistent look and feel. And I think that one of the things that I noticed that was brought up here too as well, the specific plan was done 25 years ago, and it just gave me the notion that maybe for one of our future meetings that we start looking at when these specific plans were done, because they need to be upgraded and they seem to be outdated. I think Loyola Corners suffers in that concept. I mean, I was trying to envision what that whole area should look like and what should it be. I think that the retail on the bottom, so I did meet with the applicant in the summer, and the plan that they talked about was really interesting, which was a lot of retail space on Fremont Street, an overhang to kind of replicate what had already happened along Fremont Street. Those elements seem to be lost now. I don't see. I mean, I looked in the plans and said, "Where is that?" I don't see that same talking or those things that were mentioned to me. I really applaud the applicant for the parking solution. I thought the lowering and raising the cars for the residential was a great idea. I mean, it certainly saves the cost of building the whole down area, but on the same token, it minimizes the amount of commercial space. So it's hard to think about those two things. I mean, I applaud them for what they did. The other thing that I had a concern about was the roof and the photovoltaic cells, because it's almost like they've put a fourth floor on the top by having it there. And that's what for me, looking at that building, I kind of looked at it and said, that's a tall building, and then we've got all this other stuff on top of it that we wouldn't normally have. And, if it was smaller, I mean, if it was like 25 feet and then it had this other part of it above it, maybe that would help, because then there wouldn't be so much density on the top floor. But it's 30 feet plus to look at. I thought that the way that we redid the pedestrian walkways was great. And I don't mind that there's no setback along Fremont Street, because it makes sense to me that we have wide sidewalks and making it a more walkable city. The thing that bothered me in the plans was where they were going to haul the material from on coming in and out of A Street, which is a very small, narrow street, and it's 2 lanes, and we're already having a big uproar about blocking that street to make it one way, that now if you're going to put trucks in there and block that off, to me, I don't understand why it wasn't on Miramonte. I mean, that to me is a wider street. You could easily get trucks in and out and not disrupt traffic too bad. But the hauling plan seemed to be an issue that I wanted to revisit it as well. I think the other key point about the space, and I think it's the thing that was mentioned in the specific plan a long time ago, was that this is the gateway to the whole Loyola Corner. As you come off Foothill, that's what you see. And when we looked at First Street and San Antonio, when we talk about the Packard Building, I mean, these are all buildings that look interesting, and they have architectural things going on that make it interesting. This building to me seemed like it was just a triangular shaped structure that was being put there with no artwork, no real design that really would say, welcome to Loyola Corners, and here's what we have, and this is what this area is attractive to. And I think that's the element that I kind of was lost and that didn't see. To me, it was just another building that was being put in like it was next to something else. So.
I'd like to just interject. I've forgotten 3 times now to say that I also had an ex parte meeting with the architect and the applicant in the summer. It was so long ago I forgot.
Ken?
I actually don't have a lot to add. I think Phoebe and John and Mike have pretty much summarized it. The only part I would like to emphasize is if we're going to make a recommendation in a motion, I think we should emphasize the fact that we need, the commercial part of this building needs to be more pronounced. It's almost an afterthought. And I think if it's going to be, if we're going to put a building there, then there has to be some viable commercial aspect to it.
Okay. I have some comments. Again, taking off from where I left off last time, when I looked at that building plans and then tried to envision that with what is currently there, I didn't see any compatibility. But you could do it. And I actually discussed some of this afternoon with the applicant, and they were quite willing to look at it. And the difference is that what you try to do is you try to put as much building as you can on the lot, so you end up having straight walls. And there is a backside. It's on Miramonte, really. But if you notice the neighborhood, if there is a second-story building, the second floor, as I mentioned earlier, is always recessed. And so that immediately takes the eye away from the bulk, because it looks like it's smaller. And so it reduces the bulkiness in your eyes. And I think this property should really the architect should really look at the second, or if there's going to be a third floor, I'm open. But like you, it's not a 30-foot building, it's more like a 36 or 38-foot building after it's all done, is that you should think about the first floor, and I'm okay with you. I don't think you could build this building and put setbacks, and he's got to have the ability to maximize the site as much as he can. So I'm okay with the sidewalk design personally. But if you had the first floor without the setbacks, and then the second floor, you might have a little bit of a recess, and the recess then have balconies, and then the actual condo, well, it would be much more pleasing to the eye. And yes, with the condos wouldn't be 2,600 square feet, but okay, they'd still be a condo. So to me, you could do that, and on the third floor, maybe even do a little more of a recess.
Jerry, are you
So we're
designing that
looking at-
building for them?
Well, no, but I'm trying to make it compatible
Well,
with
but
the
I
neighborhood.
think you could say that you want things to set back, but I don't think you should design their building.
But we have the right, according to the specific plan, to make this compatible with the neighborhood.
Yes, and all suggestions, I'm sure, will be welcome.
Okay.
Architect meets developer.
That's it. That's all I have to say. So,
Go for it.
So I'm going to make a motion.
John, can I, before you do, can I?
Go.
I just want to influence your motion. I think.
I'm making a motion as a stake in the ground, and I fully expect my fellow commissioners are going to make it better.
I think the purpose of this motion is that, I think from the applicant's perspective, he would probably like to go before city council if it's denied. And so I think we need to be very clear and go on the record as to not only why we're denying it, but what we think it ought to be. So when you make your motion, that is going to be our record. That's going to be the public record of
Yes,
what this meeting is.
and we have a terrifically competent staff who's capable of correcting all our mistakes and errors and omissions and commissions. So I'm going to make a motion to deny this project based on the findings that it does not meet the goals, policy, and objectives of the general plan and the Loyola Corners Neighborhoods Commercial Specific Plan, design guidelines, and ordinance design criteria adopted for the specific district or area. And I'm reading word for word from the findings on page 10, number 2A. B, the proposed proposal does not have architectural integrity and does not have the proper appropriate relationship with other structures in the immediate area in terms of height, bulk, mass, and design. Number C, building mass is not articulated to relate to the human scale, both horizontally and vertically. Building elevations do not have variation in depth and do not avoid large blank walls. So those are the specific findings, and would probably like to reference several of the Loyola Corner specific findings, that the size and mass of structures and building elements should be moderately small, reflecting a human scale. Architectural character should be informal and unpretentious. Design of new buildings, additions, or other renovations should be compatible in terms of scale, color, and materials with surrounding buildings. Roofs should be limited to simple forms and materials which tend to visually tie structures together rather than produce discord. And
would you repeat that?
no, I'm going to create some discord here. And that then I would like to reference the fact that there are specific design recommendations that we are making to the applicant and as appropriate city council on specific areas of design that we would want to see incorporated in a new submittal. And I can read briefly that list, if that would help. Architectural integrity, sloping roof, have it read as commercial, not residential, limit the number of materials, approach this from a neighborhood perspective, not a commercial perspective, create appropriate setbacks on sidewalk, street, first floor, second floor, focus on reducing perception of mass through whatever mechanisms are appropriate, including setbacks, height as required, recognize that this is a gateway building and needs to set a tone. More emphasis on commercial development, certainly on the first floor and perhaps on the second floor as well. And we have three wise men and one wise woman up here, and what other things should we include in this motion?
I think that's probably enough.
Well, I mean, you guys told me that I needed to make it complete, so.
Do you have enough, David and Jan?
David's eyes glazed over about page 10.
David wants to add more.
Well, we'll be able to. So I appreciate how specific those comments were in the motion, but we'll also take tonight's comments and see which of those comments work into some of the other findings as well. So we'll use those as a minimum, and we'll go through all the findings as we prepare.
James, will we be able to see?
Just gonna say it's-
Can we see it before you? Can we see a draft?
To the city council?
Well, we could.
Is that appropriate?
What we would normally do is make a motion tonight, and we would incorporate those into the document, and then perhaps we'd share them with the chairperson. But if the commission would prefer, I mean, we could make a motion to prepare a denial document for the next Planning and Transportation Commission meeting, and then the actual resolution or document would be adopted at the next meeting.
I would really support that. I think that's a great idea.
Then we can draft it and put it on the
Yeah, I
agenda.
think that's a great idea.
Because we do have a meeting scheduled on the 20th, I
The
guess it
20th,
is.
Right.
So,
18th.
I would.
So would you
I
withdraw your motion, and I'll make a new one? No,
Well,
I
it's
mean,
essentially the
the
same
motion
motion,
is,
just to-
the motion is to have staff prepare.
right. So I'll
what he
revise the
said.
motion to say, my motion to say, have staff prepare a motion to deny based on the findings, based on specific direction that we think this project needs to incorporate in terms of design, amenities, et cetera. And with it coming back, I personally would like to see a draft come to us.
But we will, John.
Yeah.
No,
At the next meeting.
No, have it come to us
In our packet.
in an email from staff with the opportunity for us individually to write back to staff if there are additional comments. So by the time it comes to us on the 20th, it's in close to final form.
Okay.
And in doing that way, we don't have a Brown Act issue, because we will
And
not
I
respond.
second that motion.
Okay.
Second the motion.
Oh, okay.
Second. Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. You may all want to leave, unless you want to hear more about commission reports and comments and future potential
don't have to.
agenda items, stuff like that.
So I want to keep.
Want to take a 2-minute here, or?
Yeah.
If you want to, you can.
2 minutes?
Yeah, okay.
Okay, all right. Should pass that water.
Good job, Mikey.
We're almost out, past the glass.
We're rationing. We're-
Expressway every day. I looked in building water. 7 feet tall.
So she said they would, the thing of interest to the Planning and Traffic Commission was accidents at Portola Avenue in San Antonio, traffic issues with kids in accidents, unsafe conditions for kids, the need for improvement at Portola Avenue in San Antonio. So we had talked about this at a project that came through, so there's that. And then they talked about the Redwood Grove Nature Preserve. They approved a community engagement roundtable. So, that's fine. That's it.
So I attended, oh, come on. I attended the November 25th meeting. There was a few things that were of interest, I think, for the commission, and I actually, James, I'm going to catch you in a second. So there's two sculptures that are going to be installed. But the question I had for you, the downtown development project, they had a conversation with that with Mayor Satterley. But I didn't understand the moratorium for the medical office uses, because there's a moratorium on...
It's a parking issue.
No, permits.
Yeah.
We're
they
no
don't-
longer...
Because they haven't figured out the parking.
Right.
Because
But the question I have is that we approved the Third Street project to be a medical office.
No, we approved it to be office. We
To be office.
specify that
But does it-
not to be.
But this is what my question, because they talked about it, but I didn't understand the concept. So if somebody wants to put in medical offices in that facility, they get denied, or they get caught up in this moratorium because it's special use?
Yeah, there is a moratorium on business licenses or permits to locate a medical office into a currently non-medical office space until this parking study is completed.
Okay. And we at Third Street just said that it's office space, not any particular type.
Which would have allowed a medical office, but now it would not. But we are moving quickly with these ordinance amendments. The moratorium was until July 25, but it's not going to take that long to get we're going to have these ordinance amendments in front of the commission on the 18th.
And Mike, as you remember, when we were talking
December.
with the applicant on
Yes.
86 Third Street, I asked if
You'll
the
get it next
applicant was willing to specify no medical office, and he said yes, and there wasn't a majority on the commission who was willing to incorporate that into the condition of approval, the recommended condition of approval. But
It will be dealt with, the issue is parking, and it will be dealt with at
as
that
part of the-
time.
at that
Exactly.
time, so it's going to be dealt with.
That's fine. That's why I was curious, because the conversation, I was listening and trying to pick up. The other thing that came out was that the utility user tax and the transient occupancy tax, that what was commented was, as more green structure is created, which means they don't have as much utility drawing power, the UUT tax collected will be less, and it does have an impact to the budget, which I thought was a very interesting thing, that as we want more green buildings, we're actually going to reduce the revenue to the city on the tax that they can collect from those.
Well, let's
actually-
build some big drafty buildings.
Well, that's what happened to the water use, too, is people kept conserving on the use of their water, and so now
Water
there is
rates are up.
the rates are up, but also people are, governmental agencies are setting a minimum fee. Even if you're not using a lot of it, you still have to
Actually,
pay for
you
the
know
minimum
where-
that supports the
You
infrastructure.
know where it's the most serious? Is the gasoline tax
Yes.
for maintaining the roads. Because
Exactly.
as cars get more and more fuel efficient, we buy
Use
less
less
gasoline.
gas.
Exactly.
Same number of miles, much less gasoline.
Yeah. So that was my report from the 25th. That was,
Planning Commission?
I did, but I thought that does affect
does,
us.
for
No,
sure.
No, the other thing is on December 2nd, I also attended that meeting, even though
Me too.
I know you were there. And just the new commission, it was a very special occasion because they swapped, or I don't know what the right word is, transitioned the city council from what's now elected. And it was quite a very fastidious.
I thought
event.
that was next week.
No, you
That's
missed
already
it.
happened.
It just happened.
Just
Came and
happened.
went
Tuesday night.
Tuesday.
So it'll be interesting to see what the new two council members, how they look at projects and how they talk about things.
And also
whether
to
they
see how
try
the mayor sets the tone, because the mayors get to set their own sort of tone for what they want the city council to focus on. So
Right, and it was all about transition, or transparency,
And energy,
energy.
and
yeah.
use of green energy.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing was of interest, that they won't be designing from the dais. I thought, well, so it would be interesting to see if that happens.
I'm sorry, what?
Well, you know, a lot of times in the city council meetings, there's this conversation that starts off, oh, we don't want to design from the
I'm not an architect, but
Yeah, exactly. So it'll be interesting how that gets transposed going forward.
Okay. Potential future agenda items, is it, you brought something up.
yes,
What
the
is it?
specific plan.
Well, I have 3 things. But go ahead, Jerry. That's one of the 3.
Okay, I thought it was a good idea.
Okay, so, we talked about the 2014, 2015, actually, it'd be the 2015 work plan for us, right? And talking in that conversation. And I noticed in the minutes was just one item, which I thought about, which was traffic hotspots. I actually think there are 3 other ones, and I don't know. So one of them was a specific plan, especially Loyola Corners, about getting it redesigned or starting that process, I think should be a priority. Because I agree that the specific plan that was written here was all about the landscaping not meeting appropriate standards and wanting to have more landscaping, and now we're 35
But
years later.
we're going to develop. That area is going to, well, we hope
Exactly.
that area is going to redevelop. It sounds
So-
like it's coming up. It would be good if we were
Well,
ahead of the
I
curve.
just talked to Ross, Gary Ross, and
Yeah, they're looking at it. So your mic's not on.
Mike's on.
So I would like to see us focus on or start that I don't know where we stand, whether that's something the city takes on as staff, or it becomes part of our work plan, or just something to start that process.
Yeah, I think introducing that as part of the work plan, since we're going to be talking about that early next year, is a good way to initiate that project.
Okay. Then the other thing I had was, and this is specific to that area, which is A Street.
Oh, yeah.
I know this project didn't deal with it, but I think we should start the conversation of what the community would like to see A Street become, sort of to get a head start on this, so that as the bridge construction
Yes,
is
so
going on,
we can coordinate with
we're kind of
the bridge.
ahead of that, because I think that it's going to come, there's a lot of conversation when they talk about the bridge. Is A Street one way? Is it two way?
Mm-hmm.
That, what does that look like? I would like us to start talking about that, to kind of, again, I don't know if that's something we can do, or if that's traffic
And I think
engineering.
that's a good idea, because the plan that we referred to for Loyola Corners was a very attractive plan, but it was really an urban design landscape beautification plan. It introduced sidewalks and street trees and
Exactly.
landscaping, and it dealt with A Street, but it never got past the conceptual design phase because it impacted some of those little office buildings where their parking sticks out into what's technically the public right-of-way. Once you put a public sidewalk there, they
They're too
lose all
short.
their office front
Yeah.
parking, so it never got off the ground. But it would be good to take up at least the circulation aspects of that and
Yeah,
decide,
'cause,
is
I've
A
had-
Street, yeah.
I've had that conversation with people who are against two-way streets on A Street, and I said, you're not thinking of the whole plan of Miramonte and Fremont, and if you look at the lights, and if you put signals at each of those, and you coordinated them in a certain way,
Yeah.
you're not going to have a traffic issue. It's not going to back up, because the lights will let it all flow. Actually, it'll actually flow better than it does now.
In the design plan, there's still components of it that can be introduced on Fremont, for example, and maybe even A Street or B Street without affecting property owners who were so opposed to it at the time. So I would say, that design plan is still valid components of it, but we can focus on circulation elements of A Street, Miramonte, Fremont.
Yeah, I'd like to see us because it would be good to get ahead of the curve so people can comment on it. It's going to take a while, and that way, by the time we're done, hopefully that it can be enacted, there'll be funds to deal with it, and then.
And we can use the A Street plan as a starting point, going one way with bike paths on either side, which
Exactly.
is a little bit almost, maybe not necessary to have dedicated bike paths on both sides of A Street, because a bike path, by its nature, is a two-way bike path. So, but we can look at those
Sometimes yes,
things.
sometimes no.
Yeah, but you have to figure out how to
Well, no, these
transition a
were
bike.
two-way bike paths on either side of A Street.
No,
That's
no,
why
it
A
should be
Street
just.
went from
There was
two-lane.
one
Yeah, but it could be
direction
one on
side.
each side of it.
Opposite
With some
directions.
sort of
Yeah,
barrier
sure.
to build. The thing is, I keep looking at is, if you're a bicyclist coming down Miramonte South, how do you get to the bridge?
So-
what's the most efficient way?
I'm going to suggest we don't try.
But we don't need to deal with it
Don't
right
talk
now.
about it now, but simply talk about
Absolutely.
agendize.
That's agendize.
Agendize it. and-
The other thing that
Part
I,
of our work program discussion.
And another thing.
well, that was two. A Street specific plan. The third thing I had was the green building code. I was quite appalled that 4% of the roof could be photovoltaic or.
That is total craziness. That
So-
has to be fixed.
Well, I think the comment is accurate, that that's just a throwback to our old mechanical equipment rooftop, and it wasn't necessarily,
Photovoltaic is.
it was never meant to deal with canopies for, solar and photovoltaic. So we can look at that independently.
Well, yeah, I don't know whether
Like you said,
that's,
It's really like adding a taller roof.
yeah.
I mean, it's almost like another roof.
If
Well,
they do it
that's
the
a
way that
different-
they designed here.
That's a
But,
different concern.
but people do different kinds of solar trellises, I'll call them, where they don't read as a roof. They read as a floating canopy. And I think part of it was how it was done here.
Right.
Although, I mean, this is probably TMI, I mean, you don't have to have them facing exactly at the angle. They work really well when they're flat, too, so. and
Yeah,
you have to
exactly.
face- Now it turns out facing west is better than facing south, because even though south gets more sun during the day, the utility needs it in the late afternoon when the
Yes.
power is mostly being
Plus in the morning you have
used.
the fog
Yeah.
as well.
Well, not so much here, but yes.
So I think if three commissioners agree with that, we can go ahead and start that right away. That doesn't have to wait
Yes.
for a vote.
Well, I think you have pretty much unanimity on that
Well, if
one.
you're going to look at this
You wanna turn your mic
new
on?
specific plan, and what about, what's the corner where Alato's is? What's that whole area?
That's what,
Woodland
but there is
Acres?
no- there is
Shouldn't
no
you look at
specific
that,
plan
too? I mean, when's the
either.
last time that was done?
Is there a
Um,
specific plan for
That's
Woodland
more
Acres?
of a, no, there isn't, but it's really governed by zoning. I don't think we have any issues there.
Don't need to have a specific?
I don't think so. I think one of the things we're going to find is that when we updated our plans for downtown, they went less restrictive. We went to form-based zoning. We relaxed a lot of height and FAR and story restrictions. I think we're having competing values here with Loyola in that this old 1990s plan is very restrictive, and there's a desire to have much larger buildings. Well, we just had that conflict tonight with what happens when you start to introduce those. So it's a little bit different situation, but we can look at there's elements of the plan that
Yeah,
need
I
to be
wonder
updated.
if it had been a different site, if there had been a rectangular site along Fremont, for example, that came in with a large-scale building, if it would have been as difficult to evaluate as this very small triangular site where, as I said earlier, parking was killing them.
Well, and one thing we're going to find as we reopen the specific plan is that when you talk about one space for every 300 square feet, that is very inadequate for
retail, for sure.
For retail, and certainly inadequate for restaurants.
For
So I
restaurants.
understand that it was reducing the parking requirement to encourage redevelopment, but there's already parking issues in Loyola. And if
Absolutely.
we stick with that
Horrible
underparked,
parking issues.
it's either going to make a real problem, or you're just not going to get restaurants
Mm-hmm.
in retail. So that's something that may not help to facilitate redevelopment if we do reopen the plan.
Yeah, the other element of that is, do we look at CN zoning and just, because of those commercial neighborhoods are quite different than downtown.
So, can we, I mean, do we need to discuss it?
I just
There
wanted to ask
additional agenda items?
these guys first. Do we need to finish the agendized thing? I have a different question I want to ask these guys.
Are there anything else, other items that we want to
No.
put on the agenda? No? Thanks, Mike.
The question I wanted to ask was, it sounds to me like every single commissioner and in staff conversations made these kinds of comments to the applicant, and nothing happened,
Twice.
twice. David, is that true?
It didn't have to be true.
Yeah, Ken, yeah, you're right, Ken.
Kimasabi?
No, I think you'll find that, going back to the study session, going back to our letters to the applicant, going back to the staff report, it's been a very, very consistent message.
We're kind of talking to the wall here, right?
Well, but I think it's very good that what we did on this with
was
John's
unanimous.
leadership, it was have a unanimous denial with basis and take a lot of time to explain what our concerns were.
Right.
So that if it goes on appeal, council will have the full benefit of what the discussion was. Because although I know it's very exciting when the public turns out for these things, the fact is, it's not just I like it or I don't like it. I'm glad to see people participate in government, but this is a bigger issue.
I agree.
There's zoning, and then zoning is mathematic. You do it by the zoning, but we're not a zoning by right community. We have design review, and in this case, we have a specific plan on top of our commercial
Exactly.
design review.
That's what made it so different.
And that's what makes our town different.
Well, it also didn't hurt that we had a city council person
That
Well, I
was
hope, well,
nice.
someone who hasn't been to many planning commission meetings
was
that
here?
I can remember.
Oh, Jean Mordot was here.
Jean Mordot was
Was he
sitting
here?
Yeah.
Oh, mon Dieu!
He came up and said
Jean
hello.
Mordot was here listening to us
But the
talk?
problem
up here
is,
and
but
talked
he
about it.
hasn't been,
Yeah.
I haven't seen
Yeah,
him.
you were talking to the woman.
But I think that
Jerry?
You're on
But I think
TV.
Ken's comments are exactly why the commission took a relatively uncommon action tonight, right? The very common action is continue it, reduce this element.
Right, it was,
Because the
That was
applica-
my point.
Yeah, the application hasn't changed essentially.
Right. And that was the frustration I had when I talked with them. And I think Jessup is a talented guy, and what he did was very clever. And my take on it is, he was getting beat over the head. I mean, he is a paid...
I'm not sure this is appropriate to be on television.
yeah, I agree with that. But even if you turn that off,
Yeah.
after the meeting.
Can we
We'll wait till the meeting.
adjourn the meeting?
Yeah, meeting's adjourned.
Now.